Yeah, go.
This is Mr. Blobby. And believe it or not, this terrifying creature was once a beloved and very popular children's character in the UK.
Ghostly hitchhikers, haunted roads, goatmen, bird monsters. Oh my, Texas is full of creepy urban legends, but are any of them true? Well, let me tell them and you be the judge. When you hear Lake Worth monster, you're probably picturing a sea creature of some kind, but no, it's a goatman. The creature is said to reside in Lake Worth, just outside of Fort Worth. It's described as this bizarre mix of a man and goat, but also has scales, so it's like a fishy man-goat. The legend dates back to July of 1969, when locals reported sightings of this half-human, half-goat creature perched on a cliff. A young couple who'd parked their car by the lake were the first ones to see the creature. They said it was massive, about 7 feet tall, and then more and more reported sightings came in, saying the goat creature would leap onto cars and hurl tires at people. Then in October of 69, a man named Alan Plaster snapped a photo of what he claimed to be the Lake Worth monster. Supposedly, this is it, and this photo started showing up in newspapers and magazines, which just fueled the stories even further until crowds were flocking to the lake at night. But whatever this thing was, if it really did exist, it was never found. The Lady of White Rock Lake. I'm sure Dallas locals will have heard of this one. White Rock Lake is about 20 minutes out of town, a nice getaway from the city, but there's a very spooky ghost story attached to it. As the legend goes, back in 1952, a tired couple found themselves driving home late one night after a party. The wife was dozing off when their car abruptly came to a halt. In the middle of the road was a woman in a torn white gown, drenched from head to toe. The husband offered her a ride, and she accepted. The wife was shocked at how icy the woman's touch was as she helped her into the back seat. They drove in silence until they reached the address that the woman gave them, an eerie, deserted house at the end of a desolate road. But when they turned to the back seat to speak to the woman, she was gone, leaving only a puddle of water behind. The couple was pretty freaked out, but figured maybe the woman had somehow gotten out of the car without them noticing, so they decided to knock on the door of the house. An old man answered the door, and when they described the woman to him, he told them the woman they had picked up was his daughter, but that she had drowned years ago in a boating accident. Ever since then, drivers have reported picking up a woman on the side of the road only for her to vanish before reaching her destination, always leaving a pool of water behind. The Frio River Valley is known for its own urban legend, the White Lady of Rio Frio. Maria Jimenez lived with her sister and brother-in-law, Gregorio, happily tending to her nieces and nephews on their ranch, but she dreamed of one day marrying and having children of her own. But Gregorio, despite being married, and married to Maria's sister no less, became infatuated with Maria. But when she rejected him, he flew into a rage and fatally shot her at her home later in the day. At her funeral, Maria's sister decided to dress her sister in her white wedding gown, as Maria never got to have a wedding of her own. It's said that Maria haunts the valley to this day, still wearing her sister's white wedding dress. But unlike a lot of tragic ghost tales like this, Maria isn't a vengeful spirit. She's just as caring and kind as she was in life. It's said she helps guide and comfort young people lost in the valley. Because she was unable to fulfill her own dream of starting a family, her spirit is said to care for the young people of her entire hometown. It's said you can spot her on misty nights, gracefully hovering over the water with her dress trailing behind her. The Lechuza is a creature from Mexican folklore, a large, part woman, part owl-like bird creature with dark magical powers. But in Robstown, Texas, in 1975, this creature became one of the biggest urban legends in the Lone Star State. Back in October of that year, the police started getting some unusual calls. People were reporting sightings of what they described as a monstrous bird. In Mexican folklore, the lechuza is believed to be a witch who can take on the form of an owl, but she keeps her human face and hair. Depending on who you ask, she could be the size of a regular owl or as big as a person. But the reports didn't specifically mention la lechuza at the time. That connection wasn't made until later. Instead, they described something that sounded just like a cross between a bird and a human. In Robstown, witnesses said it stood anywhere from 2 to 6 feet tall, with a bird body but a human-like face. There were also supposed sightings later on in Banquet and Alice. By January of the following year, folks in the valley were reporting encounters with a massive bird. In San Benito, 2 police officers even saw a bird with a wingspan that was apparently 10 to 12 feet long, flying over a lagoon. A radio station even put up a reward for capturing the big bird alive. And in Brownsville, a man named Alverico Gajardo told reporters he came face to face with a big bird right outside his door about 4 feet tall, saying it had a beak like a spear and eyes as big as silver dollars. He described his experience, saying, "That animal is not from this world. I was scared." Next, we have the Donkey Lady. A lot of scary lady urban legends in Texas. Any Texans in the audience want to explain why that is? The Donkey Lady is probably one of the most famous urban legends in the state, though. There are a few different versions of the tale, but they all center around a donkey-human hybrid. One version says a woman was badly burned, leaving her with hands that looked like hooves, and a face resembling a melted donkey. Awful. Another story goes that she was a woman who adored her pet donkey. When the donkey was taken away and mistreated by neighbors, they ended up drowning both the woman and her beloved animal, and now her spirit is said to linger near the Donkey Lady Bridge in San Antonio, Texas. And we're kicking off this list with the Manakwa. In 2002, there were a string of strange incidents reported in Uttar Pradesh linked to a creature called the Manakwa. Now, this was a tough case to research because there are several descriptions of this creature and they're about as vastly different as it gets. What ties them together is that the sightings happened at night and whatever it was seemed to swoop down from the air and scratch the victims' faces. Some said it looked like a metal bird, sharp and shiny. Others described it as a monkey man with features of both a human and a primate. There were those who thought it resembled a small aircraft, and some insisted it was a large insect, almost like a massive sized grasshopper or something. So this caused a wave of mass hysteria with people actually staying up all night in order to protect themselves from this thing or things. Till this day, we're not exactly sure what was going on here in the early 2000s, but reports died off almost just as fast as they began. Number 9, Nale Ba. The legend of the Nale Ba is pretty well known in Karnataka. Nale Ba refers to a sign some use to hang on their doors in order to ward off a malevolent spirit. Nale Ba translating to come tomorrow. This malevolent entity is a ghostly spirit who roams the streets at night, knocking on people's doors while calling out people's names. Those who answer her call are met with a gruesome death. In the 90s, a more specific version of the tale became popular. Nale Ba was said to be a witch stalking the streets at night, knocking on people's doors, this time imitating the voice of someone they knew, a loved one, a friend, pleading with the resident to open the door to let them in. They'd get more and more desperate as they spoke, sometimes more frustrated. If it managed to convince the person to open their door, they would die. So, if you ever find yourself in Karnataka, make sure to hang a sign on your front door with the words Nale Ba, and maybe sleep with your headphones in or something. Next up, we have the ghost of Sanjay Van. Sanjay Van is a picturesque forest, dense with its old and winding banyan trees, but amongst the trees are eerie tales of the supernatural, the most prominent being the legend of the White Lady. Local lore tells of a female ghostly figure, cloaked in white, wandering the forest depths before vanishing into thin air. People claim to have seen her semi-translucent form, often near the forest's cremation ground. Witnesses report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and coldness as the apparition appears and then vanishes. Some also claim to hear disembodied cries and laughter, specifically the sound of children playing, only they don't see any. Then at number 7 we have the Pavagda wolves. This is a pretty disturbing case, or string of cases, all of which happened in 1983 in the small village of Pavagda in Karnataka. Several girls under the age of 5 began being snatched away in the night, even when their parents were close by. The first case happened in April of that year, and several would follow. They would be taken silently. The parents would have no idea what had happened until the following morning, when they'd discover they were missing. Their remains would also be found, completely mangled as if they'd been attacked by some sort of rabid beast. Authorities would find paw prints at the site of each of the attacks, so a rogue wolf was believed to be responsible. There was something that wasn't adding up though. If it were just a standard wolf that was responsible, there would have been drag marks on the ground, but there weren't. It was as if whatever this animal was, it stood on 2 legs, carrying its victims instead of dragging them like a quadruped would. The villagers began fearing that tantrics were responsible, stealing their young ones to perform dark rituals. In the end though, this case is sadly somewhat of a mystery. At our number 6 spot is the Headless Ghost of Lothian Cemetery. This Christian cemetery at Kashmir Gate was built in 1808, and there are a number of European soldiers buried there. One particular soldier, named Nicholas, is said to roam the cemetery at night, carrying his own head in his arms. There are different stories as to how he lost his head. One legend says he was beheaded during the Indian Rebellion of 1857 and was buried without his head. Another version goes that he fell in love with an Indian woman but became heartbroken when he was unable to marry her. He was so distraught that he ended up taking his own life. How he managed to sever his own head, I'm not sure. Maybe during a battle he just shoved it into a cannon or something.
Starting us off at number 10 is the White Lady of Balati Drive. In Quezon City, there's an avenue named after the row of trees that used to line it. Although they are now gone, in Filipino culture it is believed that Balati trees are inhabited by mystical beings and other supernatural creatures, and despite their removal from the area, it is rumored to remain just as haunted as the day they were planted. There are few variations of the legend, but the most popular is that there was once a woman who died after being hit by a taxi along the Balati lined road late at night, and whoever hit her was never caught. Since then, it's said she haunts the roads, scaring unsuspecting taxi drivers who dare trespass alone. Some say she might even appear to be lost and wait for a taxi to pull over so she can come inside and terrify the driver by revealing her true form, a corpse covered in blood and bruises. However, others say sometimes she will just disappear out of thin air. Many have believed the tale, including a police officer and captain of the QCPD who was eventually suspended for cowardice after he refused to patrol the area after a rise in incidents. Allegedly, each accident claimed that a woman in white was what had caused the issue, and so the officer refused to investigate, fearing he too would become haunted by the White Lady of Balati Drive. Next up at number 9 is Death by Slippers. I've heard some crazy urban legends in my day, and this one might just be the most out there. Apparently, there's an urban legend in the Philippines that states you must bring your slippers inside the house at night. Why is that, I'm sure you're wondering? Well, according to the legend, anyone who forgets to bring their slippers in at night will be visited by a dangerous cult that takes the slippers and kills the owner. Apparently, each night a group of Satanists roam the streets looking for victims to sacrifice to their evil overlord, and apparently the only thing you have to do to protect yourself from being their next victim is bring your shoes inside at the end of the day. Okay. Listen, I'm not saying it couldn't be real, but I am saying this sounds a lot like something a really tired parent might say to make sure that their kids didn't leave all their stuff lying around outside. Either way, if I am ever in the Philippines, you best believe I'll be bringing my slippers inside, because I'm not about to tempt fate and accidentally get killed by an evil Satanist cult. Next up at number 8, the Tikbalang. Said to lurk in the mountains and rainforests of the Philippines, the Tikbalang is a tall, bony, humanoid creature with the head and hooves of a horse. To me, it kind of resembles a half-transformed werewolf meets centaur, which is just straight up terrifying. Although legends differ from region to region, in the north it most commonly enjoys pranking travelers and making them hallucinate so that they get lost along the path. But in the south, its origins are much darker. Down south, stories of the Tikbalang speak of an evil, red-eyed demon horse prone to fits of rage and continuously puffing on a cigar. It's said to be the result of a soul that did not make it out of the womb. Without having ever existed on the earthly plane in human form, it now haunts this realm, preying on the living as revenge. According to the myth, however, all you need to do to defeat this terrifying demon horse is pluck 3 hairs from its mane, taming the creature and making it indebted to you forever. That, or just hope you come across one in the north, I guess. Next up at number 7, the Matrikulon. These terrifying creatures are kind of like the sick and twisted version of the Immaculate Conception. As legend has it, at night when everyone is asleep, they will sneak into the room of a virgin woman and impregnate her without her knowing. Apparently the ghoul is invisible to the human eye, so there's no way to protect against their devilish advances. Then after a few months inside, the monster will return to take what he gave to the woman, but first killing her and then consuming the life that was growing inside of her. There are also some versions where the Matrikulon will prey on already pregnant women, and in this case, it's believed that the husband can protect his wife from getting a visit from the creature by swinging a butterfly knife, or balisong, over her stomach during labor. I mean, from top to bottom, this entire legend is incredibly dark, and I'm just praying that there is no chance they exist in real life. Next up at number 6 is the Chanak. It's very common in many cultures and religions for new lives to be baptized, mainly because it signifies the young person as being a part of the Christian faith, and it symbolizes a life in devotion to Jesus Christ. And while some cultures believe it's not necessary to be baptized in order to get into heaven, it's definitely the preferred method. But due to the Spanish colonization in the Philippines in the 16th century, their version is a bit more intense. As the story goes, many believe that any souls who are not baptized by the Catholic Church in their early years go into a state of limbo after death and will return to earth as evil spirits. These spirits are called the Chanak and are said to lure their prey deep into the woods, tricking them by shape-shifting to look like a little one abandoned and crying. Once they are picked up and have the victims right where they want them, the vampiric creatures will morph back into their true devilish form and attack. The only way to save yourself is either turn your clothes on inside out in hopes that the Chanak will be amused and set you free of the enchantment. That, or some garlic and a rosary, can also do the trick in most cases.
And we're kicking off this list with the Scandinavian Gangger. Gangger, that's a hard word to say. Might be mispronouncing it. Originating in the folklore of Scandinavia, particularly Norway and Sweden, the Gangger is believed to be the embodiment of a deceased individual who returns from the grave to haunt the living. These spectral beings typically manifest with a pale complexion, dressed in tattered burial garments. They're often associated with unfinished business or unresolved grievances, seeking retribution or closure. It kind of sounds like a normal ghost, but they actually are very, very different. Legend has it that encountering one of these beings brings great misfortune and even death to those who cross its path. Instead of just appearing in the background of photographs or whispering incoherent sentences into spirit boxes like your regular old vanilla ghosts, the Gangger are malicious spirits that can actually cause physical harm. The mere sight of these spectral beings is said to invoke a profound sense of dread and foreboding, as they are believed to possess this malevolent intent, even towards loved ones. Efforts to ward off or appease one of these beings have been present in Scandinavian folklore for centuries. Traditional rituals like offering prayers, performing protective charms, or conducting burial rites were believed to provide some defense against their haunting presence. At number 9, we have a letter from a blind man. This one is short, but man, is it chilling. A dark tale that began circulating just after one of the darkest periods in modern history. In post-World War II in Berlin, a time plagued by scarcity, poverty, and hunger, a tale spoke of a young woman who encountered a blind man navigating his way through a bustling crowd. The two ended up striking a conversation, leading the man to ask if she could deliver a letter to the specified address on the envelope for him. Considering it was conveniently on her route home, she agreed to help. As she turned to walk away, though, she craned her head back momentarily to see if there was anything else she could assist the blind man with, and to her astonishment, she caught sight of him hastily making his way through the crowd without his dark glasses or his white cane. Understandably, she was pretty suspicious at this point and headed over to report the incident to the authorities. The police swiftly raided the address mentioned in the letter, where they uncovered a gruesome discovery. In the home were piles of human flesh intended for sale, and within the envelope entrusted to the young woman was a chilling message that read, "This is the last one I am sending you today." The Beast of Gavan, terrifying creature's tale, has become a blend of fact, fiction, and folklore. The legend speaks of a monstrous beast that haunted the rural landscape of Gavan, a region in south-central France, during the mid-18th century. According to the stories, the creature possessed an insatiable appetite for human flesh, targeting women and children as its preferred victims. Descriptions varied, but many accounts depicted a fearsome creature resembling a massive-sized wolf or a hybrid predator, possibly with blood-red eyes and a black stripe running down its back. Its ruthless attacks, coupled with its supposed invincibility against conventional weaponry, left the people in a state of dread, desperation, and as the legend grew, so did the attempts to bring an end to the creature's reign of terror. Countless hunters, soldiers, and villagers embarked on these journeys to track down and take out the beast, yet the creature thwarted their efforts time and time again, evading traps, bullets, and even organized hunts. The legend reached its climax when a local hunter named Jean Chastel claimed to have slain the beast using a silver bullet. Over the years, the legend of the Beast of Gavan has been dissected by historians, mythologists, and enthusiasts, giving rise to various theories about the true nature of the creature. And apparently this did happen, it's just we're not quite sure if it was some sort of paranormal creature, like a werewolf, or if it was just a particularly large rogue wolf. Number 7, the Well to Hell. The Well to Hell urban legend was spread through whispers, emails, and internet forums. According to the legend, in 1989, a team of Russian scientists drilled a hole deep in an unknown location in Siberia, and as they delved deeper into the Earth's crust, they allegedly pierced a barrier that unleashed unimaginable horrors. The story goes that as the drill reached an astonishing depth, the temperature spiked dramatically and strange sounds began emanating from the hole. The team lowered a heat-tolerant microphone down into the hole, and disturbingly, the team claimed to have detected agonizing screams of tormented souls and eerie demonic voices rising from the depths. Terrified, they quickly withdrew the drill, fearing that they had inadvertently opened a gateway to hell itself. There is an audio recording of this supposed hellish audio, and spoiler alert, it's been ruled as a hoax. However, it is pretty unsettling to listen to. I remember hearing this years and years ago when I was a kid, and it kind of freaked me out. Next on the list, we have the Faceless Woman. This story takes place in the London Underground at Beacon Tree Station. The story goes that a station supervisor was working the late shift, minding his own business, when the door to his office started to shake. First, he just brushed it off, thinking it was just the rumble of passing trains on other lines, but when the door didn't stop rattling, even into the wee hours of the morning when no more trains were running, the worker decided probably time to leave. He headed up to the upper office where his coworker was stationed, and as he was making his way up the staircase, he just couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Someone was trailing behind him. He turned around and was greeted by a disturbing sight. A woman stood below him with long blonde hair and without a face. standing just a few feet away. He suddenly dashed up the stairs in a panic before finally finding safety in the top office. Once there, colleague could see the fear in his face before asking him, "Did you see a woman with long blonde hair and no face?" Bubble Yum. We're starting off the list with Bubble Yum. Produced by Lifesavers, it was the first soft bubble gum to hit the market in 1975. And it was a big hit. It tasted great, the demand was high, but some started to wonder just how they got the stuff to be so nice and soft. And this is where school kids would use their wild imaginations and start to make up stories of their own. Around 1977, rumors started to spread that this delicious gum was actually made out of spider eggs. Now, this seems completely ludicrous. There are far softer things than spider eggs. The crazy thing is, this rumor actually caught on. It spread fast, and sales of this once very popular gum actually started to decline. This became such a big problem for Lifesavers that they were forced to actually take out an ad in the paper specifically addressing this rumor, with the headline reading, "Someone is telling your kids very bad lies about a very good gum." At number 9, we have the Life Cereal Kid. John Gilchrist was a child actor, most famous for his role as Mikey in a very popular commercial for Life Cereal in 1972. But in the late 70s, a story began spreading around schoolyards across America that Mikey from the commercial had consumed a lethal dose of Pop Rocks and Coca-Cola, the combined carbonation of these two products leading to his stomach exploding. Other versions go that his head exploded, but the point is, the poor chap was said to have died as a result of this explosive mix. The story became so famous that Mikey himself, John, who is very much alive, recalled his mother receiving a phone call from someone paying their respects to her son. His mother was completely baffled, as John was perfectly fine out playing baseball. She had John's brother go to the field to make sure he was okay though, and that's when John first heard about the wild Pop Rocks and Coke rumor going around. Around this same time, the sales of Pop Rocks started to plummet as this urban legend became more and more widespread. Number 8, Momo the Monster, aka the Missouri Monster. This is an ape-like creature that was reported by a number of witnesses in rural Louisiana in 1971 and 72. It was described as being around 7 feet tall, covered in fur, with a large pumpkin-shaped head and glowing orange eyes. The most famous sighting happened on July 11th, 1972. A teenage girl named Doris was in the kitchen. Her 2 younger brothers were out playing in the backyard when suddenly she heard them scream. Doris looked out the window and saw a large, hairy creature matching the description above, carrying a dead dog. Tons of reports would come in that year, and it eventually led to a crew of hunters being assembled to try and track the creature down, but nothing was ever found, and the sightings pretty much stopped after that. At number 7, we have Gene Simmons' his tongue. Kiss was absolutely huge in the 70s. They were pretty much the biggest band on the planet at one point, and bassist Gene Simmons was and is famous for a lot of things, one of which is his exceptionally long tongue. A tongue which he often sticks out on stage and has been known to use excessively off of it. I read his autobiography when I was 13. I learned a lot. Anyway, back in the height of Kiss's fame, rumor about the origins of the demon's massive tongue started spreading around, and the consensus was that it was actually from a cow. The story was that he'd somehow grafted it onto his real tongue. This is of course not the case. I don't think that technology exists to perform an operation like that, especially back then, but as soon as it does, I will look into doing it myself. Next on the list we have the Owlman. The tale of the Owlman began with 2 reported sightings in Cornwall in 1976. The first was reported by 2 young girls who claimed to see a large winged humanoid owl creature sitting atop the bell tower of a church in the small town of Maunan, which they had been visiting with their parents. They ran back to their parents to tell them what they'd seen, and they were so visibly distraught that their father decided to cut the trip short. Just a couple months later, 2 teenage girls were camping overnight in the woods right by that very same church. One of the girls, Sally Chapman, was standing outside the tent when she heard a loud hissing sound. She turned around and, to her complete shock and horror, saw what looked to be a man-sized owl creature with glowing red eyes. It then flew up into the air. More sightings of the mysterious creature started being reported within the following days, all within the vicinity of that church. Alright, we're going to start things off with what is known as the Paulding Light, or the Dog Meadow Lights to locals. So this is a strange, unexplained light that locals will observe all the time. There's a freaky ghost story connected to it as well, and we'll get to that, but let me just stress that these lights aren't just something people talk about. There's plenty of video of the phenomenon. So yeah, look at that. It's kind of wild. This video here was posted by Johnny Shocker. In the description, he talks about how he'd seen the light on more than one occasion, and that it would float towards him, like floating in midair, then it would vanish, only to reappear and repeat the same process. So there's a lot of local folklore surrounding this mysterious light. Probably the most well-known is the tale of the railroad brakeman. At one time there were railroad tracks in the area, and one chilly night, the brakeman, with lantern in hand, spotted an oncoming train. But there were railway cars stopped on the tracks. He tried desperately to signal to the train, waving his lantern back and forth, but unfortunately he didn't get out of the way on time before being bulldozed by the train, which is kind of his fault. Like, you see the train coming from that far away and you can't just like pop out of the way. I know you're doing your job, but at some point you gotta put yourself first, you know? Alright, couldn't do this list without talking about the Michigan Triangle. Just like the infamous Bermuda Triangle, this is a section of Lake Michigan where all sorts of strange phenomena have taken place. Some are just stories, but there are very real occurrences as well. Missing planes, ships, people. There have also been a number of reported UFO sightings in this triangular section of the lake. The most famous ships to disappear in the area include the Lake Griffin, which vanished into thin air last seen on September 18th of 1679. The wreckage was never found. The most famous incident involving a plane is the Flight 2501 incident. This was a flight carrying 55 passengers and 3 crew, which vanished during its flight on June 23rd of 1950 while flying over Lake Michigan. Then there's the story of Stephen Kubacki. He was a college student on a skiing trip who went missing in 1978. A massive search was launched, but he was nowhere to be found. A little over a whole year went by, and then out of the blue, the guy just shows up again. Even stranger, he had no memory of the time that had passed. Alright, we got some very interesting Bigfoot footage for you next. Yes, there have been a number of Bigfoot sightings in Michigan, and this one happened to be captured on camera by a man named Eddie V, who sent the footage to the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization. Alright, so I'd actually never seen this footage before, which I'm kind of surprised by, because it's pretty cool footage. The thing isn't obscured by trees, the camera's not shaky, you very clearly see something walking across the river, and to me, it doesn't look like a bear. It kind of looks like it's carrying something too. Some people say it could be a deer, or maybe a baby Sasquatch, if this is indeed a Sasquatch. I mean, could it be a dude in a suit? That's always a possibility, but I don't know. What do you all think of this one? It's a cool video to me. It kind of looks like, almost like it doesn't even have fur or something. I don't know, strange. Next up, we have the urban legend of Nain Rouge, aka the demon of the Strait. So this kind of falls into the cryptid category as well as folklore, which I always go nuts for. I love hearing about weird creatures that I've never heard of before. Nain Rouge is kind of similar to Mothman, and that it seems to show up right before disaster strikes, almost like a harbinger of doom. But this thing isn't a giant moth creature. It's more like your classic red devilish kind of monster, or a hobgoblin as it's sometimes sometimes described. This red menace hails from Detroit specifically, and is said to have appeared before major events like the Detroit riots in 1967 and the Battle of Bloody Run in 1763. The first major appearance of the creature is said to have been before Detroit's very own founder, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac. The story goes that he'd seen a fortune teller who told him that he was to respect and appease this goblin-like creature, so he smacked it with his cane and told it to get out of his way. Then his political career took a nosedive, really didn't go so well. He was eventually banished from the city of Detroit, he was imprisoned for a time, lost all his money. Just don't be mean to the goblin monster, I guess. Next on the list, we have Melon Heads. The Melon Heads. I talked about these bulbous weirdos during one of my many Ohio urban legend slash cryptid videos. I was glad to get to talk about my little bobble-headed friends again on this list, but it turns out Michigan's brand of melon heads are a little more violent than the Ohio ones. Not something I'm assuming, it's just what I've read. Beginning sometime in the 1950s, tales of these strange, misshapen creatures began to spread around the city of Saugatuck. The story goes that the melon heads were youngsters suffering from hydrocephalus. They were being treated by a rather cruel doctor, and one day they rebelled against their mad doctor, taking his life before eating his remains. And they scuttled off into the forest, where they began living their new life, retreating in tunnels and caves under the city, occasionally coming out to terrorize innocent civilians. Hell's Bridge. So this bridge in Rockford is said to be haunted by demons and ghosts. Double whammy, demons and ghosts. I gotta say, probably best not to go to this bridge. So the tale goes that in the late 1800s, a number of youngsters were going missing in the town. And one night, the townsfolk decided that it might be time to, look for them. So they embarked on a massive search. They left the remaining young ones in town with an old man named Elias Frisk to watch over them while the adults were gone. Well, Frisk was not the innocent, weak old man that he pretended to be. He led the young girls and boys out into the woods, where he eventually revealed to them the location of all their missing little friends. He then took each of their lives one by one before dumping them into the Rouge River. When the townspeople arrived back in town, they found Fisk all alone, muttering to himself in an eerie tone. He was covered in blood and kept repeating the words, "The devil made me do it." Fisk was hanged from the Rockford Bridge, now haunted by the spirits of his victims and the demons that had possessed him. Alright, back to cryptids now with the Torch Lake Monster. In Antrim County, there is a tale of a creature said to stalk the waters of Michigan's longest and deepest inland lake, Torch Lake. Tales of this lake creature are most often told at night around Camp Hiawatha. The creature is also referred to as the Sea Panther, as it has the body of a lizard and the head of a cat, with slimy green skin and two different colored eyes, one blue and one brown. It's said that the creature will rise up from the lake at night to attack unsuspecting fishermen or campers. At best, it'll just chase you off and scare you away. If you're not so lucky though, it may drag you into the depths of the lake, never to be seen again. Next up is the Dogman. Werewolves gotta be my favorite mythological creature, so Dogman sightings get me real excited. The Dogman is a creature said to be, as the name suggests, a part man, part dog creature. It stands about 7 feet tall. What's extra creepy about this creature is that it's said to have a very unnatural howl. It doesn't sound like a wolf or even your classic werewolf. It sounds more like a man's scream, and something about that just sends a shiver up my spine. Monstrous creatures making human-like sounds just gives them this kind of uncanny valley sort of vibe. Very off-putting. There have been apparent Dogman sightings reported ever since 1887, where one witness supposedly died of fright after encountering the creature. There's also another famous story in the 60s where a bunch of hippies were in a van and they saw it peering into their window, though I wouldn't really trust what hippies said, especially in the 60s, because, they were on a lot of stuff, but who knows. Second to last on the list are the singing sands of Abete Gris. The sands of these beautiful beaches in the northern Upper Peninsula are said to sing. And actually, they're not just said to, they really do. When you rub your hands through the sand, it makes this high-pitched whooshing kind of sound, which is not actually a sound you'll get on every beach. So the legend goes that a long time ago, a Native American woman lost her lover in the waters of Lake Superior. She spent countless days returning to the beach, crying out and singing for him in a desperate hope that he would one day find his way back to her. Her cries are said to be heard in the very sand itself to this day. And what makes the singing sand even stranger is that the legend goes if you remove the sand from the beach, take it somewhere else, try and make it sing, it no longer makes any noise. Finally though, we have the old Presque Isle Lighthouse. Nothing more classic than a good old-fashioned lighthouse ghost story. This lighthouse was erected in 1840, but it wasn't in operation for very long. Less than 30 years later, it had fallen into disrepair and was replaced by another lighthouse a little farther up north. In 1977, it became a museum, owned and operated by George and Lorraine Paris. Now, all the wiring had been removed. The lighthouse was no longer operational, but in 1992, just a year after George had passed away, a number of people, from pilots to sailors, had reported seeing a distinct glow coming from the old lighthouse. And passers-by have told stories of spotting a mysterious figure lurking about the lighthouse, only to vanish into thin air. Many locals believe the ghost of George Paris still visits his beloved lighthouse from beyond the grave. With all that said, at number 5, we have another urban legend that originated in the 70s, which is also related to spiders. This is one many of you probably have heard of, the Spiderbite legend. There are many different versions of this story, but the main gist of it is that a woman goes on vacation to some tropical destination and gets bitten by a rare species of spider, usually on her cheek. The bite starts to swell up until she basically has a balloon on her face, at which point pops and out comes hundreds of baby spiders that had been laid inside her cheek. Luckily, this does not happen in real life. Spiders don't find the human body a good place to store their eggs, but it's understandable why this tale became so famous. It's a horrifying idea. It's an early example of body horror, the idea that there's some foreign thing growing inside your body that you just don't want there. Plus, spiders. So many people are petrified of spiders. Next up, we have the legend of the clown doll. This one is kind of a different version of the famous babysitter and the man upstairs urban legend. In this story, a babysitter is watching over kids in a very large family home with a bunch of different rooms. Before the parents leave for the night, the father tells the young babysitter to go to a specific room to watch TV once the kids go to bed, as he doesn't want her roaming the house too much. This is a bit strange, but it comes into play later. So the evening goes by as normal, and eventually the kids do go to bed, and after they've been tucked in, the babysitter makes her way to the living room to spend the remainder of her night. As soon as she walks into the room to turn on the TV though, she immediately spots a hideous life-size clown doll, in some versions a statue, propped up in the corner. She can't stand the sight of the thing, but decides to try and ignore it and turn her attention to the television. But it's just there, staring at her from the corner of her eye. At one point, the parents call to check in, and she asks them if she can cover the clown statue with a sheet, to which the parents reply, "What clown statue?" Then, to the babysitter's horror, the clown starts to move towards her, attacking her and in some versions, ending her life. In other versions, the police arrive and it's revealed that the man is an escapee from a mental institution who was living in the family home for weeks, avoiding detection due to how big the house is with so many places to hide. At number 3, we have Bunnyman. This is an urban legend featuring a crazed, axe-wielding man in a bunny costume. The legend originated in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but the interesting thing about this one is that it all started from 2 very real documented incidents. The first happened on October 19th, 1970. A couple had been driving back from a football game and decided to visit a relative on their way. So they parked their car. Before they got out, they noticed something moving in the rear window. And almost as soon as they noticed this, a hatchet flew through the front passenger window, and a man in a white bunny costume started yelling at them, saying they were trespassing. Luckily, no one was harmed, and the second incident took place on October 29th. A construction security guard named Paul Phillips approached a young man standing on the porch of an unfinished home. He was wearing a bunny costume and was brandishing an axe. As the guard got closer, the man in the bunny costume said, "You are trespassing. If you come any closer, I'll chop off your head." From that point on, more and more reports started coming in about who the media now dubbed Bunnyman. As to the validity of a lot of these other sightings, it's kind of up in the air, especially when the stories started becoming more embellished. Bunnyman is now well within the urban legend category, with tales of him possessing powers or having come back from the dead. Next on the list is the Dover Demon. In the town of Dover in Massachusetts, a series of cryptid sightings occurred on April 21st and 22nd in 1977. The first was reported by 3 teenage boys who had been driving along a road at night when their headlights illuminated an odd-looking creature. It was about 3 to 4 feet tall, crawling along a stone wall, and they described it as having a large bulbous head and bright orange eyes. It had long, spindly arms and legs and was completely hairless, with rough skin like sandpaper. Just an hour after this initial sighting, 2 other teenage boys spotted the odd creature as they were walking home. Their description of the creature was exactly the same, only now it wasn't climbing a concrete wall, it was just walking on 2 legs, and apparently ran into a gully where it stood next to a tree. The third sighting happened the following day. A teenage girl and boy were in their car when they spotted the creature on the side of the road. All these witnesses drew pictures of the creature for police. I've found 2 of the original sketches online, and seeing as these are from like 2 separate reports, 2 different groups of kids, pretty crazy just how similar they are. Seems like they did see something similar to what they drew. And finally, at number 1, we have Cropsy. Cropsy was a boogeyman type urban legend that originated in New York in the 1970s. He was said to be a satanic man, sometimes sporting a hook for a hand, that lived in the abandoned Willowbrook mental institution and would come out in the dead of night to kidnap young victims who were never seen or heard from again. Stories of this nightmarish figure continued into the 80s. As it turns out, though, these stories of young ones going missing were connected to a real-life boogeyman, a man named Andre Rand. Rand had been in and out of prison for a series of disgusting crimes, but it turned out he had a long list of victims who he had kidnapped, many of which were never found. In 1988, he was finally convicted and would have been eligible for parole for some reason in 2008, but was brought to trial once again as new evidence was discovered in a kidnapping he had committed 23 years prior. He was convicted of that crime as well and remains in prison till this very day. Next up is the Vanishing Hotel Room, aka the Vanishing Lady. This legend began circulating in the late 1800s, taking place in France. Like with most urban legends, there are multiple versions of the tale, but it goes something like this. A mother and daughter had recently arrived in Paris. They check into a hotel, but pretty soon the mother begins feeling ill, collapses. A doctor arrives who informs the daughter that her mother will need medicine. That can only be picked up at the other end of town. The daughter sets out to get the medicine, but when she returns to the hotel hours later, her mother is no longer there. In a panic, she asks the staff where her mother is, but they all claim not to know who she's talking about. According to them, the girl had arrived at the hotel on her own. In some versions of the story, the girl suffers a mental breakdown and ends up at a mental institution. In another version of the legend, it is revealed that the mother had actually died of the Black Plague, and the hotel tried to cover it up by disposing of her body and pretending like they'd never seen her in order to avoid bad publicity. At number 4, we have the Russian sleep experiment. This story began circulating online, and according to the chilling tale, in 1947, Soviet researchers conducted a classified experiment in which 5 subjects were kept awake for an extended period of time. The goal was to test the effects of sleep deprivation on human physiology and their mental state. Days turned into weeks, however. The subjects began to exhibit disturbing behavior. They became increasingly increasingly paranoid and delusional, plagued by hallucinations and exhibiting signs of extreme psychological distress. Desperate attempts to stay awake led to self-mutilation as they tore into their own flesh, driven to madness by their sleep-deprived states. The most horrifying twist and the legend comes when the researchers decided to release a gas into the chamber in order to induce sleep. However, instead of providing relief, the gas triggered a nightmarish frenzy of violence. The researchers entered the room only to find one man still standing. The bodies of the other 4 men, or at least what remained of them, lay strewn about the room. Next, we have another urban legend from the London Underground, the crying girl of King's Cross Station. In 1987, deep underground in the tunnels of the London subway at King's Cross Station, a fire had broken out. The fire took the lives of 31 people, and some say they still hear the wails and cries of the poor souls who lost their lives there, especially the crying woman. Late at night, when the platform is mostly deserted, some say they spot a woman dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, sobbing into the night, the echoes of her cries reverberating off the long, empty tunnels. When they go to approach her, though, she simply disappears. Coming in at number 2, we have the Black Vulga. The urban legend of the Black Vulga is a chilling tale that is circulated in various parts of the world, but particularly in Eastern Europe. According to the legend, a menacing black luxury car, often identified as a Volga sedan, prowls the streets at night, instilling fear in all who cross its path. The Black Vulga is said to be driven by mysterious figures, frequently described as malevolent entities or agents of the supernatural. Witnesses claim that the vehicle appears seemingly out of nowhere, its engine roaring ominously as it glides silently through the darkness. The car's windows are tinted, hiding the occupants from view and shrouding their intentions in secrecy. Terrifying encounters with the Black Vulga involve tales of kidnappings, disappearances, or even encounters with supernatural beings. Some versions of the legend suggest that the car is driven by vampires or other supernatural creatures preying on unsuspecting victims in the dead of night. Some have actually theorized that perhaps the Polish secret police spread these more outlandish legends in order to invalidate claims of genuine kidnappings carried out by the government. And at number 1, we have the Catacombs video. Now, this video really does exist. It's just the person behind the camera who's never been identified, which has led to multiple theories about the circumstances of this case. Is it just a hoax, or was this actually a man who got lost in the catacombs, never to be seen again? This is one most of you have probably heard of, but it's a story that's always stuck with me. One that chilled me to the bone when I first heard about it and watched footage. The video is said to have been filmed in the early 90s, possibly 1993. In the black and white footage, we see a POV of the cameraman as he makes his way through the dark tunnels of the Paris catacombs. Soon, though, his breathing begins to intensify and he picks up his pace, now running aimlessly through the tunnels until he finally drops his camera altogether. Continuing to run further into the darkness, the camera continues to record until the battery dies. The camera was found later on, and searches were made for this mysterious man, but no body was ever discovered.
Coming in at number 5, the Mamba Barang. A terrifying Filipino folklore witch, the Mamba Barang uses their powers to get revenge on those they feel have either wronged them or those who they are envious of. As legend has it, the Mamba Barang will use their evil powers in order to conjure spirits and manipulate insects to enter the body of any person they choose, most often through voodoo rituals. What is scary about the Mamba Barang is that they're not some evil demon or mythical creature, but just some ordinary human woman who practices black magic, and once they decide to conjure a spell on you, there is not much of anything that can be done to stop it. Once the ritual has been completed, she will instruct the insects who it is they are to infest, and they will climb inside the body using any orifice required. There is often pain at the site of entry, for example an intense earache if they go through the ear, or even hemorrhoids if they use the south door. But these are not like other diseases. They will resist all known treatment. In fact, there are no known medicines or cures for any of the afflictions caused by the witch. The only way to be freed of the torment is to hope that the witch allows the infestation of bugs to leave your body. Otherwise, you're fresh out of luck. In most cases, the torture will continue until it takes your life, and only then will the horde of bugs evacuate your body. Coming in at number 4, the Amalan. Said to be the Filipino version of a half-zombie, half-vampire, the Amalan is an undead demon that is believed to not have transferred its power to a relative during their time of death. This results in the demons rising from their graves so that they can lurk in the woods, feasting on the blood of the nearby villagers. Their preferred method of attack is usually believed to be through biting the neck, since, you know, vampires and all. However, there are some versions of the legend that state they will tickle the victim to death while simultaneously absorbing their life force. I mean, if I had to pick a way to go, this sounds better than being stabbed and left to slowly bleed out, no? Well, I do also hate being tickled, so I don't know, maybe not. It all really depends on how long it would take for me to be drained of all my life force, I guess. The good news is that you can escape them should you ever find yourself face to face with these demons. It's advised that you climb up a tree or jump into the closest body of water, as they're unable to climb and they have a great fear of water as it will turn them into a pile of worms. Next up at number 3, the Manang Gal. Said to be a vicious, flesh-eating, blood-sucking demon, the Manang Gal is definitely one of the creepiest urban legends I've ever heard of. In their true form, they're described as being hideous women who have the ability to sever their body into two, something that they must apparently do in order to feed. When they detach their torso from their lower half, they become vulnerable, so they must hide their lower half to keep themselves from being attacked. They then grow wings so that they can fly around looking for their next victim. The Manang Gal tends to prey on men, first shapeshifting to look like a beautiful woman so that they can seduce them before luring them into a secluded area, tearing them apart and sucking out all of their internal organs with their long tongue. The only way to defeat the ghoulish creature is to wait until her body is severed, as the lower half remains motionless and vulnerable. Once you find the lower half, sprinkle either salt or crushed garlic onto the creature, and the demon will be unable to join back into one entity. Then just sit back and wait until sunrise, as once the sun hits the separate torso, she will be destroyed. Coming in at number 2, the Aswang. This one might be the most famous of the urban legends, but to be fair, it's for good reason, cause it is just about the most terrifying thing I have ever read about. Supposedly a flesh-eating, shape-shifting, vampire-like creature, what's truly terrifying about the Aswang is that you never know who around you could be one. As the legend goes, during the day they appear to be just like us humans, blending in with the world and working normal jobs, but at night they transform into flesh-eating, blood-sucking, horror film creatures who unleash their predatory instincts, actively hunting the most vulnerable in the community. The creatures are said to have long tongues and backwards feet, and are apparently so thin and frail they can hide behind a single piece of bamboo. But don't be fooled by their small frame, as if they attack, there is no saving you. What's scariest about them though is their ability to transform the appearance of other objects too. In order to avoid suspicion, they are known to use plant matter to create a doppelganger of their victim's corpse in order to hide their feeding habits and fool the locals into thinking they died of another cause. The only way to repel the dreadful creature is with garlic or religious artifacts, particularly used against them during the day as they are weakest in their human form. Then once you have them at their weakest, you can kill the monster by decapitating it. And last up in our number 1 spot, encantos. Often associated with the spirits of ancestors in the Philippines, encantos are kind of a catch-all term for a few different mythical creatures, but are most commonly linked to fairies. Now, if you have only ever watched animated fairies from your favorite childhood shows your whole life and you're wondering what the heck these creatures are doing on a scary list, well then my friend, you have got to learn a little bit more about fae and the terrifying things they are capable of. When it comes to Encantos in particular, their motives are almost backwards to many other ghouls, as if they don't like you, they are rumored to inflict deadly disease, mental illness, or even gain complete possession of their human target. But if they've become smitten with a human, they will sometimes opt to bring them good luck, or they might just kidnap you and bring them into their realm forever. It's said you can try to ward them off by carrying a magical charm or an amulet, but once they have their sights set on you, either good or bad, it is hard to keep them away forever. Although the mythical belief in the Encantos may have originated as folklore, it has also been theorized that the fair-skinned fairies were actually created as a metaphor for the Spanish friars who colonized the Philippines, often abducting and taking advantage of the young Filipino women in the woods. So considering they're based off of real people, you don't get much scarier than that.
Number 5, the Yeti. We've all heard of the Yeti before. This is basically the snowy mountain-dwelling version of Sasquatch. It's said to roam the Himalayas, including parts of India, Nepal, and Tibet. So imagine a big, hairy creature, something like a mix between an ape and a bear, but walking upright like a person. White fur, that's what people claim to have seen. Local stories from the Himalayan region in India talk about this creature being huge, covered in fur, and surprisingly strong. Some say they've seen it from afar, a mysterious figure moving swiftly through the snowy mountains. The Yeti grabbed worldwide attention in the 50s though, when explorers and climbers started reporting enormous footprints and sometimes even glimpses of these creatures during their trips. Just like Bigfoot though, nobody's ever caught one of them, so its existence is still unconfirmed. Next up, we have the Faceless Ghost. Now, this is actually a piece of footage, not an urban legend, at least not yet, but this video has been making the rounds lately, so I think it's worth putting on the list. From what I've been able to gather, this bus driver was finishing his shift for the night. He'd arrived his last stop, but there was still someone on the bus. In the clip, we see the driver speaking to the woman, I believe asking her where she's going, before the woman turns to look at the camera, and oh boy, where's her face? It doesn't look like she's just being masked by shadow either. The whole face area looks completely black, almost like a Jawa from Star Wars or something. At this point, the driver gets freaked out and tells her she needs to leave the bus. Another man apparently says to call the police. The driver was so shaken that he actually got off the bus, spoke to authorities who had arrived at the scene, and apparently when he got back on the bus, the mysterious woman was gone. I don't know, she probably just had a face covering on or something like that, but you know, internet, it's fun to speculate and imagine. There's other stuff going on, right? And number 3, we have the Monkey Man. Now, this one is similar to the Manaka. The reports happened around the same time. Some even lumped the Monkey Man in with that earlier case, but this one is specific enough that I think it deserves its own spot on the list. So in 2001, Delhi, India was caught up in this bizarre frenzy over a creature dubbed the Monkey Man. Monkey Man was described as a 4'6" to 5'6" hairy humanoid with glowing eyes and metal claws. Some witnesses even said it wore a silver helmet and had an almost military type outfit on, terrorized the city, jumping from building to building like Spider-Man. People were terrified of the idea of encountering this aggressive clawed monkey, so they started staying indoors after dark. Attacks were being reported all the time, but even with all the investigations and media coverage, the Monkey Man was never caught or identified. And over time, the panic died down and the Monkey Man became another urban legend. In at second place, we have Kuldhara. This Rajasthan ghost town is believed to have been inhabited by the Paliwal Brahmins who abandoned it overnight in the early 19th century. The reasons for this sudden mass exodus are not 100% known, but there's a legend surrounding it. Story goes that the minister of the state, Salim Singh, fell in love with a beautiful daughter of the village chief. Fearing his wrath, the villagers, rather than succumbing to his demands, decided to leave the village en masse, leaving behind a curse that anyone who tried to inhabit the land would face dire consequences. Over the years, Kuldhara has earned a reputation as a haunted village. Visitors report strange occurrences like ghostly apparitions, whispers, in the wind, and sudden drops in temperature. Some have even claimed to hear the laughter of children or see shadows moving in the deserted streets. The place is said to be so haunted that locals recommend staying as far away from it as possible after dark. And that's gonna bring us to our number 1 spot. Finally, at number 1, we have Bangar. Bangar in the Alwar district of Rajasthan has become known as one of the most mysterious and haunted places in India. In fact, probably takes that number 1 spot. The story goes that a tantric, a practitioner of black magic, fell in love with Princess Ratnavati, the beautiful daughter of the Madho Singh who built the city. Hoping to win her love, he tried to use dark magic, but the princess saw through his plans and turned his spell right back on him. In his dying moments, the tantric cursed the fort and the surrounding area, leading to its infamous reputation. According to local lore, the fort and its vicinity are completely haunted. It's believed that entering the fort after sunset or before sunrise will bring terrible misfortune. So terrible, in fact, that the place is completely off limits after sunset. The Archaeological Survey of India put up a board at the fort's entrance warning visitors against being inside the premises during night hours. And visitors have reported various supernatural occurrences, whispers, cries, footsteps echo throughout the fort, and some claim to have seen ghostly apparitions wandering the area. This bridge, dating back to 1917, is where the spirit of the donkey lady is said to lurk to this very day. Back in the 60s, locals reported hearing eerie, donkey-like cries near the bridge, and the stories got passed on through the decades. This next story is actually kind of funny, I think. The Dancing Devil. If you're a San Antonio local, let me know if you've heard of this one, because it's pretty bizarre. On Halloween night in 1975, a man walked into El Camaroncito nightclub. It was an unforgettable night, but not in the way anyone was expecting or wanted. This mystery man was apparently an incredible dancer. The ladies were blown away by his incredible moves. They all wanted to dance with him. But at one point in the night, one of his dance partners happened to look down at the man's feet, and suddenly everyone heard this loud shriek. I picture the music stopping, everyone's just freezing, looking over. The woman had looked down at the man to see that his feet had transformed. Some said they looked like chicken feet, others described them more as hooves. The man then rushed into the bathroom and was never seen again. Some say he'd climbed out of the bathroom window, running off into the night, but there was also smoke left behind with a strange sulfur-like smell. The building is no longer a nightclub. It's changed hands a number of times, but the story of the Dancing Devil continued to be told, and staff at the building would say that there was a lingering sulfuric smell, especially in the men's bathroom. Next, we have the tale of the fang creature of Old Pearsall Road. Back in the 60s, a group of friends were driving home late one night along Old Pearsall Road. And by the way, if I'm pronouncing anything incorrectly, you let me know in the I already know you're gonna let me know in the comments. Anyway, they were driving along the road. They'd had a few drinks, this group of friends, and suddenly the driver swerved, convinced that he'd seen a little person in a white shirt and diaper with red stains around its mouth. After regaining their composure, the group continued on home. The next day, though, the driver just couldn't get the image of whatever that thing was out of his mind. Had he just imagined it? Was it an animal of some kind? Or even worse, was there actually a little youngster alone in the middle of the road that night that he almost ran over? He decided to drive back out there to take a look. But once he reached the spot, he realized he'd suffered a flat tire. He got out of the car to find 2 puncture marks on it. He changed the tire and then settled back into his car. He hadn't gotten a great sleep the night before, so he started to drift off, still pulled over on the side of the road. But then he woke up to a sharp pain on his neck. In complete horror, he realized the creature from the night before was now perched on his lap. Legend has it that the driver's sister later had a dream where he warned her never to venture down Old Pearsall Road. Bowden Road in Huntsville is sometimes referred to ominously as Demon's Road. There's a lot said to go on here. Seriously, be careful driving along this road alone at night, because it sounds like you're taking a real risk. For starters, you have a ghost boy boy with glowing red eyes that's said to ride around on a tricycle and drag you to hell. Some people will claim to spot mysterious red lights and orbs along the road. There's a faceless monster that's said to stalk people walking or driving along it. And then there's the graveyard. Martha Chapel Cemetery. One story goes that in 2001, a man from Houston decided to visit the Martha Chapel Cemetery with his buddy. They parked near the graveyard. The driver stepped out of the car. His friend appeared to be sleeping in the passenger seat and he didn't want to disturb him. So the man started walking through the cemetery. But he noticed something strange happening near one of the graves. The ground seemed to be moving. Suddenly, a hand reached up out of the ground and grabbed him on the ankle, but his friend ended up rushing over to help, and together they managed to break free and kick the hand back down into the ground. They ran back to the car, but suddenly the driver froze. His friend was actually still in the car. He'd been asleep the whole time. At least that's what it looked like. It wasn't until they were about a mile down Demon's Road that the driver realized his friend was actually dead. He'd suffered a heart attack while en route to the cemetery. We head to Corpus Christi, Texas now with the USS Lexington, a decommissioned World War II aircraft carrier that now operates as a museum, a supposedly very haunted museum. People will claim to spot shadow figures. There are also the full apparitions of two sailors, one that will help guide lost visitors back to the deck before disappearing, and one that likes to hang out in the engine room, explaining how the turbines work before vanishing into thin air. The museum official described one of the strangest things they'd ever experienced on the carrier involving their pen caps, saying, "I always use a ballpoint pen, and over the course of a few weeks, I lost about 6 pen caps off my desk. The day I lost the 6th pen cap, I turned over my office looking for them. My office was spotless by the time I was through. It wasn't until I returned to my office the next morning I found all 6 pen caps laying side by side right in front of my computer keyboard." Finally, we have another haunted Corpus Christi hotspot, Center Theater. Legend has it that the spirit of a woman employed as an usher at this theater still lingers to this day, bound to the theater after a terrible accident. According to the story, the woman died at the hands of her jealous lover as she exited the women's restroom on the upper floor near the mezzanine. She was fatally stabbed, her white uniform now stained in red. Visitors to the theater have reported strange things, especially in the area near the top of the stairs overlooking the seats. It's said that this is where the woman's ghost is most likely to be spotted. But she doesn't like people hanging around up there. Some are lucky to only feel an unexplained chill in the air. Others say they've been pushed, only to turn around and find that there's nobody else with them up there. At least no one living. So with all that said, all you Texas locals, have you experienced anything weird in regards to any of these stories? Have you heard any of these before? Let me know down in the comments. I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. This video is about scary moments in history that they don't teach in school. Yep, we found all the best facts from history that they can't teach you about in school for obvious reasons, so you can learn them from us instead. Click the video now to find out more.